Joining me now is Richard Johnson, a lecturer in politics at Queen Mary University of London. And it's for the likes of you to, sum it all up and tell your students what all this was about. You can't quite do that yet, but, his legacy is there to a large extent.
I mean, beyond anything else, he'll be remembered for Brexit.
Yes.
And for COVID. For Brexit, this is a battle that he wanted. He delivered a harder Brexit than probably any other Conservative leader would have wanted to have done or did. And I think that shows a real distinction from Theresa May's legacy that he will hold on to. COVID, the vaccine rollout, of course, is a thing that he'll always mention, but he's not a micromanager. And I think COVID didn't play to his strengths. He's a big hitter, a big image type person. And I think the details of different lockdowns and tiers and so on really threw him off course, and he really never regained balance. And then with these scandals, that was the fatal blow, really.
But then he really stepped up on Ukraine, seen as a hero in Ukraine, and he's had he's had standing ovations in the Parliament there. But actually, in the end, that worked against him a bit here, didn't it? Because he was so carried away by that, some people would argue. Yes,
and actually, it's a very good point. Ukraine, as well, is very significant. It put him on the type of stage that he likes to be on. Right? He's a showman. This is not to necessarily denigrate him, but he is a showman. He likes to rise to these kind of big moments, and I think that he saw in Ukraine an opportunity to do that, and he may also genuinely believe in it. Not trying to disparage that either. But as you say, I think that was important actually in holding back some of the Conservative MPs earlier on. I think they may have moved against him earlier, back in the spring when the Sue Gray report and all of that came out to begin with. But that held them back. But I think just the torrent of scandals and really the by-election defeats. At the end of the day, I think those mattered the most for the Conservative MPs because they could see themselves in the different types of seats that were being defeated.
This morning, before he came out, all the talk was of him not being the interim between now and the election of a new leader. And a lot of backbenchers saying that can't happen. He comes out in bombastic form, actually, saying that he's going to stay on. He's still got more to achieve. So that does make it complicated, doesn't it? The mechanics about getting rid of him are complicated, and do they want more tension with Downing Street?
I think it'd be quite difficult to get him to go straight away if he doesn't want to do that. I mean, there are ways that they possibly could do it. Some of these start to involve the palace. I don't think anyone in the Conservative Party wants to get the palace involved. I think the compromise will be a shortened leadership contest rather than a contest that goes right up until Conservative Party conference in October, perhaps one that takes just this month. And I think that's something that can be quite flexibly arranged because the Conservatives' own internal rules are extremely flexible and really left to the decision-makings of the 1922 committee and the National
When was it the
Convention.
last time there was a month-long Conservative leadership election?
Well, actually, when Theresa May became Prime Minister, succeeding David Cameron, that was a very short contest because it didn't go to the members in the end because Andrea Leadsom had to withdraw before it went to the vote.
So just to explain, the parliamentary party whittle it down to two, and then that goes to the wider party. And what you're saying is there wasn't two in the end; there was just one.
That's
and
right.
That was Theresa May.
And I could imagine some Conservative MPs would like to actually replicate that now. So they decide, and then perhaps they have an agreement with the MPs at the start and say, whoever comes second withdraws. So actually, we decide the whole thing
to speed it up.
To speed it up.
And maybe that's the compromise they reached today behind the scenes.
I have no inside knowledge, but if they wanted to speed it up, that would be a way to do it, to actually remove the choice from the members, because that's what takes the long period of time, because you have to get the ballots out and all the campaigning in the country and all that.
What do you think Boris is going to do now?
Well, I would imagine what he wants to do is to end on a high, to have a sort of swan song. What he does after he ends his time in Downing Street, my gut reaction is he won't remain an MP for long. He'll go off onto the world stage.
Yes.
There's a little bit of me that thinks he might hang on if he feels that he's been pushed out unjustly. He could always stand in a leadership challenge in a year's time.
Or this one. He could stand in this, couldn't he?
He's disqualified. I had to look into that because if he'd lost a vote of no confidence, he wouldn't have been able to stand
Yes,
in the subsequent
but he won
contest.
it.
But because he won it, I think he could. He's not going to do that. I'm pretty sure of that. But maybe next year.
But who knows?
Who knows?
It's so unpredictable.
Yeah.
He could stand against Rishi Sunak. Anything can happen. Thank you very much indeed.